deserve a good spanking.
Next time you want to lay hands on me, you better make sure I'm dead.
失ってるっていう設定になってるんで、ゲームを
Bayonetta is a witch and she has lost her memories, and so as the player progresses through the game, they also experience and they learn more about Bayonetta's past along with Bayonetta. It's one of the key ideas of the characterization, the character development, was to implement some sort of way of accentuating the character's movement during battle. So the idea then was a natural progression to Bayonetta, with being a very effeminate, very feminine witch. She had her long black hair sort of streaming behind her, and it went a long way towards accentuating her physical movements as well. However, having her hair fanning out behind her tended to cover up her body, and you really didn't get to see too much of the action. So they redesigned the character and had the hair flowing down off of her arms. And another idea that they had then was to have the main body of her hair sort of flow around her body and sort of accentuate her movement in that way. And so actually what it comes out to is her battle suit is composed of her hair magically weaving around her body. So to further add more depth to that then is one of the main battle features that she has is summoning forth hands and feet from creatures from hell. And simply having those summoned forth really wasn't exciting enough, so they decided to go back to sort of the idea that her hair is magical and magically imbued, and her hair actually becomes a portal. And so when she's summoning forth these entities, she's using her hair as a conduit through which they can enter the real world. And at that time, in that instant, then her hair actually has to recede from her body, therefore revealing more of her actual body underneath. The larger the summoning that she does, the more actually of her body that ends up being revealed, and that's just the way it is. Luca, who's appeared in a couple of the trailers. He's an important character in the storyline, and he definitely has a certain level of involvement with Bayonetta herself, but that in and of itself, maybe he has his own sort of agenda or his own reasons for participating in the storyline. The visual design goal was not to create something that was very photorealistic or something that was very strictly set in a realistic type of setting, but go in more of a fantasy direction. Even then, within that context, the design goal, the technical design goal, was to have the game built at 60 frames per second. For the music, the game is very aggressive, very hardcore style of gameplay, but the main character being female, they didn't want to have something that was just very rough and very hardcore sort of music to go with it. They want something that sort of accentuated or emphasized the femininity of the character. So discussing with the sound composer, they came to the conclusion, let's have some sort of a jazz, like an up-tempo jazz style, which is something you really don't see in any games anywhere. So that sort of became the unique sound basis for the game. When we set out coming up with the character's design, the character's combat style, we thought about implementing real-world weaponry and seeing what more can we do with these kinds of things. One of the main ideas that came out was having the character punch and kick, but also fire bullets while punching, and that progressed actually into kicking. Well, what happens if she kicks while she's or shoots bullets while she's kicking as well? So that led to equipping guns onto her feet as well. There's a huge variety of weapons within the game context. We've also seen in some of the latest trailers of the whip, for example, and the idea is less that, oh, well, do you prefer the gun or do you prefer the sword, in so much as out of a whole variety of weapons, which do you prefer? But even then, taking it a level further, there is equipping weapons to both the hands and the feet, and the huge variety and the combinations of all these various weapons that they're endeavoring to create a kind of gameplay experience where you can choose which sort of weapon you like. Each individual weapon has its own pros and cons. Sword, I mean, it's very easy to see that the sword, obviously, it has a very strong melee sort of attack, but it doesn't shoot anything, so it's not good at all for long range. But taking that further, the other weapons that they've designed and implemented into the game, then they'll each have their own pros and cons, and the player is totally free to choose whichever weapon they like to use and make the most of the game out of that. Well, the base setting for the character is she's running around shooting guns and swinging swords around, and that is the base gameplay element for it. They've also prepared an extra level with the torture attacks. It's actually about taking it to the next level and having sort of that almost sadistic sort of element to it, where you're not just killing them, but you're inflicting pain on them as well. To take that even then to another level, then there's actually lots of different varieties in there based on maybe the different enemy configurations as well. The most important aspect of the game is the control implementation, the response time, and the intuitiveness of the controls themselves. That the controls should respond exactly the way you want them to respond, and respond immediately without any sort of delay. And a lot of people have maybe had comments or maybe given praise for the graphical quality or the speed or the action that they're seeing in the trailers. But the reality is that you have to feel the game, you have to play the game and feel it to really appreciate and get the full understanding of what Bayonetta is all about. Bayonetta is first and foremost a single-player experience. There's actually also no download contents planned for the game, but the idea behind that, though, is not to have any additional content that comes after the game has been released, but to actually have everything included in the game from the get-go. So the game will launch in 2009 on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, and launch worldwide simultaneously.